Coming in at number 10, we have Justice League War. Now, even though DC hasn't been able to get their footing when it comes to live action superhero movies, they definitely have made some amazing films in the animated world. And Justice League War is a reimagining of how the Justice League is formed in the fight against Darkseid. This movie starts without any of the heroes knowing each other, so they do that classic thing when a bunch of heroes end up in the same place and no one knows each other. They fight. Now, in this fight, Superman really does own Batman. Everything that Batman tries to throw at him gets stuffed without even coming close to slowing Superman down. So why did I put it on this list? Well, the thing that brings the fight to the end is right before Superman is about to punch the Dark Knight into another dimension, Batman calls out Superman by his real name, Clark Kent, stopping him dead in his tracks. This is what makes Batman so incredible. In this rendition of the DC universe, he was the first person in the world to figure out who Superman was, and through his powerful intellect, he took complete control of the situation. He had that trump card in his pocket the whole fight. So one could argue that the entire time Batman looks like he's getting owned was just him studying Superman so he could learn how to fight him better. He could have called this out at any point. Also, there's a reason why I put this one at number 10. It's because he kind of does get beat up. Coming in at number 9 is Batman vs Superman. Even though this movie was a massive stinky egg, it still had a Batman vs Superman fight that ended with Clark Kent begging for his life and asking Batman to save his mom in the infamous Martha scene. I'm looking past how much this movie missed the mark to highlight the fact that Superman came into this fight very unprepared and Batman was the complete opposite. He had the kryptonite dust to turn Superman into basically a regular person, and he laid into him with some iron-plated right hooks. This all capped off with a kryptonite spear that left a nice slice wound in Superman's face. Imagine how this movie would have ended if their moms had different names. Coming in at number 8, we have New 52 Batman, number 36. One of my favorite things in the DC universe is when Batman is forced to take on a group of heroes, especially when it's the Justice League. It's always interesting to see how the writers will create new ways for Batman to earn his keep amongst the gods. In this issue, members of the League have been turned into crazed Joker versions of themselves, and one by one they go toe-to-toe with Batman, each one of them unable to beat the Bat. Batman is able to pull this off through a giant mech suit that he's created just for this special occasion that has a specific tactic to beat each one of these heroes. Now, when Superman shows up, the mech suit reveals that it has microscopic red suns in the fists that will drain Soup's powers while he gets his head caved in. But the Man of Steel blasts past these fists, he pulls Bats from the mech and starts flying him into space. Right when it seems like there's no hope for our caped crusader, he spits a wad of kryptonite gum into Superman's face, giving Bats the last-minute victory. This one wasn't a destruction of Superman, but he had to fight the main members of the League beforehand, so I'm gonna give him this one. And the gum was such a cool Batman trick.
Kitty Pryde has something of an advantage on Deadpool in that his attacks tend to require a target that's, tangible. If he can't actually hit her, he'll have a hard time beating her. On the other hand, her ability to change her tangibility would allow her to mess with Deadpool, similar to how she fought Wolverine in What If Astonishing X-Men. While she wouldn't really be able to kill him, it wouldn't be much trouble to incapacitate him. Unless he teleported away, in which case, yay, he ran away and she beat him. Plus, more recently, she phased through galaxies and transcended the multiverse, so she could probably figure out a way to beat some annoying guy in a suit. Number 6, Moonstone Ms. Marvel. This one may be a bit controversial because technically it was a supervillain acting as a superhero, but she actually tried to be heroic for a time, so I say it counts. Plus, it's a funny story. After Deadpool stole a bunch of telepathic babies from her, she chased him down. Luckily, Deadpool had his guns with him. Unluckily, he forgot she was bulletproof. And the rest of the fight didn't go so well. He latched onto her, but she realized she could just fly up and drop him, and she did, and Deadpool can't fly. He's really great at falling though. But yeah, when your abilities nullify a huge part of Deadpool's arsenal, read his guns, you have a pretty good chance of beating the guy. Number 5, Crypto the Superdog. I know it's kind of weird to include Crypto but not Superman, but hear me out. First of all, in all honesty, there's a good chance that Superman is just too fast and would beat Wade so easily it isn't even worth talking about. But also, Deadpool could have kryptonite weapons in his satchel, which could stop Superman from beating him. However, one thing that Crypto has that Superman doesn't is the cuteness of being a dog. Particularly after his time with Dogpool, I suspect Deadpool would be much less okay with fighting a dog than fighting Superman, and I think this reluctance could stop him from hurting Crypto, or at least make him pause long enough to let the dog have his way with him. This is an entry on the list that isn't based on any sort of history with them fighting, but was kind of a shower thought that I thought I should put in. Number 4, Thor. In Deadpool Annual number 1, Deadpool was after Daredevil while being bugged by Madcap. This was a fight that led to the epic Deadpool-Madcap combination, and it was not even close. Thor absolutely wiped the floor with Deadpool, which is understandable given that Thor is a freaking god who can create lightning bolts. And the worst part is, Thor wasn't even trying. Daredevil just said, lightning them, they're healing factor guys, and Thor went, as you wish, and zap, there they go. Kind of a cheap choice since Thor is obviously so much more powerful than Wade, but it's too clear a choice to leave out.
Coming in at number 3, we have Superman Red Sun, a one-off comic that runs with the idea of what if Superman landed in the Soviet Union instead of America. This comic is amazing, and one of the best parts is when Russian Batman puts a beatdown on Superman. He lures Superman into a trap that has him surrounded by red sun lights, and then hits him with everything in the Krav Maga handbook. Superman actually almost dies in this fight, but then Wonder Woman swoops in to save the blue Boy Scout from an early death, and then Batman actually commits suicide to avoid being caught. This would have probably been number 1 on the list if Batman didn't get help from Lex Luthor to pull off this plan. Coming in at number 2, we have The Dark Knight Strikes Again. This is the follow-up comic to the famous Dark Knight Returns, and I have to say, it's not as good, but it can be hard to follow up one of the best comics ever written. Well, in this comic, it has gone out that the Bat is back, and Superman goes to have a nice little chit chat with him. Also, if you don't know, in this universe, Batman, along with a lot of the other heroes, are very old, and Superman and Batman aren't anywhere close to friends anymore. So when Superman shows up at the Batcave, Batman unloads a wagon of whooping on him. He has a series of devices set up in the cave that are just there to take down Superman. Flash and Green Arrow are both there to give Batman a helping hand at putting Superman down, and this is all topped off with one of the coolest Superman beating tools ever, kryptonite gauntlets. This entire fight leaves Superman a bloody mess. And coming in at the number 1 spot is Injustice 2. So basically the same stuff is going on as Injustice 1, but this time we have even more heroes and villains, and Brainiac gets involved. Now I will say that there are 2 endings to this game. One of them has Superman win and merge with Brainiac to become one of the most powerful beings in the universe, and he makes Batman his slave. But I put this as number 1 because if you make the choice to have Batman win, then Superman is depowered and Batman leaves him locked away in the Phantom Zone with no powers. Pretty much the biggest way you can destroy Superman. Alright everyone, that has been our list, and as promised, I'm going to give you guys my picks for my favorite non-DC, non-Marvel superhero games. First, I gotta pick Infamous, a series of games that has you running around as a superpowered 20-something with the weight of the world on your shoulders, and it is some of the best superhero gameplay that I have ever seen. The effects that your good and evil choices have on the world is extremely interesting, and in the most recent edition, you get to explore some interesting new powers like concrete and neon. After that, I have Saints Row 4. There was a time when Saints Row was just a Grand Theft Auto clone, but after the 3rd game, the franchise really took a turn for the strange, and in the best way. In the 4th game, you can explore a vast array of new powers and strange weapons, and there's even an expansion where you get to fight your way out of hell. And my final pick is Crackdown. Now, the first one of this 3-game series is my favorite, but really all of them are just dumb fun. The best part is you start off as this kind of scrawny super cop, and by the end of the game, you're a juiced up super cop with some very generic but extremely fun abilities. You mix that in with a host of Batman-esque vehicles and you have a great game.
Number 10, The Question. Either of them. As a sleuth-based hero, The Question's abilities revolve around investigation, not combat. The Question aims to disrupt evil by using information. As a result, both Questions have slightly above average combat skills, but not by that much, and they operate with standard weaponry, neither of which would necessarily be up to the task of stopping a relentless killer robot. Not that an upgrade in tech would save you, as seen in Our number 8 is one that pains me. It's my superhero crush, Nightwing. While the former Boy Wonder was trained by Batman and has extensive combat skills, he is still just a man. A fine one at that. His attempts to set out and form his own mark mean he doesn't necessarily have access to all those wonderful bat gadgets. Barring a fortuitous fight in a smelting plant, it is doubtful that Nightwing's agility and other skills would be a match for the relentlessness of the Terminator. Nightwing already has a hard enough time defeating the first Terminator in his life.
Coming in at number 7, we have The Dark Knight Returns. This is probably the most iconic Batman vs Superman fight, mostly because it takes place in one of the greatest comic books of all time. In this, we have Superman in a very weakened state from stopping a nuke from crashing into the United States, and Batman is in the most old geezer state we have seen him outside of Batman Beyond. Batman really pulls out all the stops in this fight. He has the classic robotic batsuit that was stolen for that garbage fire movie Batman vs Superman. He has help from his newest Robin sidekick. He blasts Superman with an entire city worth of electricity, and he has Green Arrow hit Superman with a special kryptonite dust that took millions of dollars to make. This leaves Superman human, with Batman busting his face before he fakes his own death. Now, if we go back and watch this fight, yes, Superman is holding back the whole time, so it's hard to say Batman destroys him. But this had to be part of Batman's plan. He knew Clark would pull his punches against an old man and an old friend, thus leaving him vulnerable to the kryptonite dust attack. And in the end, Batman wasn't looking to kill Superman, he just wanted to send a message, which he definitely did. Coming in at number 6, we have Armageddon 2001. Let's mess around with timelines a little. Armageddon 2001 is an alternate future where Supes has gone rogue and starts killing off heroes left, right, and center, along with destroying any military defense in the world that might fight against him. This means that the president has one guy to turn to, and it's good old Batman. Batman again uses a superpowered suit, but this time he has kryptonite on hand from the get-go and really beats down Superman until he's literally green from kryptonite poisoning. Coming in at number 4, we have the Tower of Babel. Once again, breaking into the world of Batman, playing out how he would beat down every member of the League. In this wonderful comic, these contingency plans for taking out separate members of the League get into the wrong hands. And the plan to take out Superman is a secret new kryptonite that Batman has created. The crazy thing is about this new kryptonite, it doesn't make Superman weaker, it actually makes him stronger. This new kryptonite that Batman has cooked up makes Superman's skin translucent. This makes his ability to absorb solar energy increase to the point where Superman can no longer control his powers and becomes a threat to everyone around him. Eventually, this leads to Superman going into hiding. Now, this isn't a straight up fight, but Batman's plan worked flawlessly and he for sure destroyed Superman.
Number 3, Hindsight Lad. Unlike the satirical Captain Hindsight, Hindsight Lad is no joke, even if his powers are at their best nagging and at their worst useless. Hindsight Lad's powers have gotten him placed in an administrative position on the superhero leagues of which he is part. Essentially, he's a glorified secretary. It is doubtful that the ability to look back and analyze one's past mistakes would be very helpful when you've already been terminated. Number 2, Beak. Now, for those not in the know, Beak is a mutant whose mutation is that he looks like a bird, specifically a chicken. And that's it. Other than that, he's just an average teenager who spent his adolescence hiding from ridicule. He's sadly one hero who is likely to be home when the Terminator comes calling.
Beak.
And in at number 1, Charles Xavier. He takes the number 1 spot because he's not usually one you'd expect to lose a fight, as his powers usually make him quite formidable. With telepathic abilities that reach around the globe, Charles is capable of manipulating minds to a terrifying extent. However, a robot has no mind to alter, leaving Professor X defenseless, unless the rest of the X-Men were there. There are plenty of them who could defeat the Terminator. For once, it's Jubilee's time to shine.
And at number 10, Taskmaster. Taskmaster's got some pretty neat abilities. After injecting himself with a Nazi-created primer, aka a modified adrenal steroid cortisol, his mind's procedural memory potential was unlocked, allowing him to absorb knowledge immediately. This extends to his muscle memory, meaning when he sees someone fight, he can mimic their moves, making him a rather difficult individual to battle since he can predict what other characters will do next in a fight. The only person who manages to evade this ability of Taskmaster's is Deadpool, due to the character being so darn unpredictable. In the comics, Taskmaster actually has defeated multiple Avenger characters, including Hank Pym's Yellow Jacket and the Wasp, and managed to fight both Iron Man and Captain America without completely getting his butt kicked. While it would be really darn lucky if Taskmaster managed to defeat the whole team, he's still got a decent chance of throwing them off guard and getting the upper hand if coming at them unprepared, or if they fought him with no knowledge of his abilities. Although these days in the comics he's considerably less threatening, having joined the Secret Avengers despite having a history of being a sleeper agent. Moving on to number 9, Cyclops. Cyclops is one of the original X-Men members, meaning it's likely that in the future of the MCU, whenever the X-Men are introduced, we'll be seeing Scott Summers make an appearance, running with the good guys. But he isn't always good in the comics. During the Avengers vs. X-Men story event, Cyclops was a major threat to the Avengers, and like the main antagonist in that story arc. Subjectively speaking. In the story arc, Cyclops becomes possessed by the Phoenix Force, and he essentially conquers Earth, which forces the Avengers into hiding. Cyclops would eventually lose control of the Phoenix Force, becoming Dark Phoenix, and he would kill Charles Xavier. But he is later defeated by his daughter, Hope Summers, and Scarlet Witch. Not saying that we'll be seeing Scott's more nefarious side anytime soon, but it's something that once upon a time was a prominent threat, so who knows how things may pan out in the future. And at number 8, MODOK. MODOK is a villain that's existed in the comics since 1967, created by Stan Lee and Jack Kirby. And in case you're wondering, his name stands for mental organism designed only for killing, or at least that's what he made his name stand for. The M also sometimes stands for mobile or mechanized, might I add. Anywho, he was initially an employee of AIM before they used him for an experiment, which turned him into MODOK, and he rebelled against them, taking over AIM in the process. He's not only got a superhuman intellect in that big ol' head of his, he's got psionic powers and the ability to calculate probabilities too. Here's the thing though, the likelihood that we'd ever see MODOK entering the live-action MCU doesn't seem super viable. Recently, the character was announced to be getting his own animated series on Disney's streaming service, and it seems to be an adaptation that will make the character more of an anti-hero rather than a flat-out villain. Plus, I don't think anyone ever wants to imagine the possibility of MODOK manipulating Carol Danvers into thinking he's a hot little piece that she can make out with. Yes, that actually happened in the comics. Moving on.
We have someone in a similar situation at number 7. We have the Daredevil. While Matt Murdock's heightened senses may be quite impressive, he is still subject to the same limitations as all those who preceded him on this list. While Nightwing at least has the option of calling in Batman for help, the Daredevil is all on his own. While he would put up a good fight, he could definitely do with the aid of a rocket launcher, or some metahuman abilities. Not that those abilities would guarantee your victory, as seen by our number 6. It's Black Canary, former leader of the Justice League, trainer of young heroes, and in possession of her canary cry. Dina Lance may appear to have this battle on lock. Unfortunately, while Terminators may be designed to look human, they definitely do not share the same weaknesses. Her sonic shriek may be able to deafen her human foes, but would have no effect on a machine. Also, the physical effects of the shriek could not be maintained forever. Eventually, she would need to take a breath. With her meta abilities out of play, she is subject to the same factors as all those mentioned before her. Still, Black Canary's meta ability is more useful than our number 5's. It's Squirrel Girl. Poor Squirrel Girl. Summoning squirrels is so rarely an advantage in any fight. Once the initial shock factor wears off, they're not really all that useful, although Dr. Doom would probably disagree. This sweet, fun-loving heroine will hopefully never find herself up against this nearly unstoppable killing machine. Number 4. The Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles. They may be heroes in a half shell and ninjas to boot, but being mutated does not equal victory. Living in the sewers usually provides these turtles with a built-in hiding place, giving them time to plan and regroup. However, the Terminator comes equipped with knowledge from the future. Hence, it should know where to find them. Pizza Night is sure to take a dark turn should the Terminator arrive.
Moving on to number 3, Mephisto. Mephisto is literally Marvel's version of the devil. He's based on Mephistopheles, the demon from the Foss legend, and first appeared back in the Silver Age in 1968 in The Silver Surfer issue 3. Written by Stan Lee, the character would be a tempter who offered the Silver Surfer the world, dangling his off-limits long-distance lover in front of him too. All things that the Surfer rejected thanks to his goodness and nobility, but thus started a pattern with the character in the comics. He's constantly used as a vehicle for temptation, making deals with the devil, and he's always a character ready to take advantage of a situation. Hell, he even hung out with Thanos while the Mad Titan had the Infinity Stones in the 1991 Infinity Gauntlet series, knowing that the Mad Titan was emotionally unstable. So what makes him deadly? Well, he's an immortal entity with magical powers, capable of a whole lot. He can alter time, alter memories, project illusions, shape and size shift, has superhuman strength and durability, and if his physical form is destroyed, he can regenerate and reform in his home domain. So why make deals with characters? Well, Mephisto cannot subjugate the will of another without their permission, which is why he manipulates them through pacts. So you can see how something like that could get real tricky for the Avengers of the MCU. The closest we've ever gone to that kind of deep-rooted manipulation was likely in Age of Ultron, when Scarlet Witch manipulated their minds. And well, that kinda screwed a few of them up for a little while, so Mephisto could be an issue. In at 2, Galactus. Next to Thanos, Galactus is one of the biggest bads to ever find himself in the panels of Marvel Comics. But here's the thing about Galactus. He's not evil per se. Rather, the reason Galactus does what he does best, going around and devouring planets, is because he's fulfilling his hunger. He's essential to the balance of the universe. Guess no one filled Thanos in on that, did they? In the MCU, that is. Yet in the comics, Galactus has been a major threat of the planets, having decided on Earth as a planet suitable for his consumption. So, needless to say, he would be a gigantic threat for the Avengers if he ever did come their way. And finally, in at number 1, Korvac. Korvac first appeared in 1975 in Giant-Sized Defenders issue 3, created by Jim Starlin, who also created Thanos, and Steve Gerber. Initially, Korvac was meant to be a throwaway character, a dude named Michael Korvac who hailed from Earth 691, and went through some serious crap. He was a computer technician who, after the alien Brotherhood of Badoon invaded his planet, was punished by them when falling asleep at work, turning his upper body into a machine, essentially making him a cyborg. He's used by the Grandmaster as a pawn in battling Doctor Strange and the Defenders, but after an encounter with the Guardians and Thor, he became a real threat. Enter the Korvac saga. Korvac fled his universe and came to Earth 616, where he stumbles upon Galactus' space station. mutation, and decides to download Galactus' knowledge into his own body. This causes him to be imbued with the power cosmic, essentially becoming a god, and he decides to reshape Earth into a utopia. Elders of the universe begin to sense his existence. The Collector, in an act of protection, decides to remake his own daughter, Karina, into a powerful being to use as a weapon against him, but she and Korvac fall in love. Korvac is eventually found out by the heroes of Earth and is forced into battle, killing a ton of heroes in the process. And after defeating them all, what does he do? He commits suicide after sensing that Karina doubts him, and in the process restores the Avengers and Guardians to life before he dies. While the Korvac saga has been occasionally criticized for its storyline, you can't deny that he'd make an interesting villain for the Avengers to take on in the future of the MCU, especially now that there's all these alternate realities that are popping up and exist.
Number 10, speaking of the MCU universe, we're gonna have to go to their version of Civil War, which was a loose adaptation of the 2006 comic arc of the same name. In that comic, it centered around the idea of pro versus anti-registration sides after a disaster that caused the death of many civilians. The film would center largely around the idea that there should be superhero accords, so kind of the same concept, but also detoured a bit onto Steve Rogers and his need to keep Bucky Barnes safe. That was a huge part of that movie. It was a lot of why he was anti-accord. It was. This film would culminate in the reveal for Tony, at least, that the Winter Soldier, aka the aforementioned Bucky Barnes, was the person who had killed his parents. This causes him to go off the deep end because he was not the most stable person in this movie. He would end up battling full out with the Winter Soldier and Captain America, and we would get actually an admittedly very cool fight scene where the two teamed up to take him down. This climactic battle would result in a moment that in my theater at least actually elicited audible gasps from the audience. It's the moment where at the end, Captain America brings down his shield right down the center of Iron Man's chest, right where his arc reactor used to be, which a few films earlier would have killed him, and even then leaves him there in the cold, in that hideout with no power. It was an intense moment. Defeated, and he lost his friends. I mean, although he had been imprisoning them, it was not the best look for Tony in either Civil War. This movie would divide fans into pro Iron Man and pro Cap camps for quite a while. Number 9, Original Sin, aka Original Retcons. This was a Marvel event from 2014, wherein it was revealed that there were secrets in the Marvel Universe, original sins, because we were playing upon the biblical allegory here. So, what was Iron Man's original sin? Well, it was revealed that he had tampered with the gamma bomb that had caused Bruce Banner to become the Hulk. And when Bruce figures this out, he is of course enraged. So he manages to get a hold of some extremist tech so that he can hold on to his Bruce Banner consciousness when he transforms into the Hulk, so that he can go and confront Tony properly. And confront him he does, taking out his Hulkbuster armor in literally one punch. Just one punch. He was the One Punch Man. Tony survives the fight by running away to get more armor. A loss or a strategic retreat? You decide.
And at 7, Dr. Doom. Victor Von Doom may not originate as an Avengers villain, but he's come into conflict with the team in the comics many a time, along with some of their members individually over the years. He's perhaps one of the most nerve-wracking villains thanks to his abilities. Victor is a scientist, a sorcerer, an inventor, and a polymath with a genius-level intellect. He can manipulate electricity, project and absorb energy, create protective shields, and can summon demons thanks to that sorcery. But perhaps his most defiant traits are his remarkably indomitable will and his code of honor. He once saved Captain America from drowning because Cap had saved his life in the past. He knows how to take advantage of a situation and can be cunning and manipulative when he needs to be. Combining technology and sorcery has made him quite deadly. Now that the rights for the character and the Fantastic Four are in the hands of Marvel Studios and Disney, I'm sure we'll eventually see Dr. Doom make an appearance in the MCU. Whether or not that'll have anything to do with the Avengers though, who knows? And at number 6, Thanos. Technically this is true. The first time around in Infinity War, Thanos defeated the Avengers and was successful in his plan to eliminate half of all living things in the universe. And then in the Prime timeline in Endgame, he used the stones to destroy the stones before Thor decapitated him. The second time around in Endgame, when 2014 Thanos showed up on the Prime timeline, he almost defeated them again if it weren't for Tony Stark sacrificing himself to kill off Thanos and his army once and for all. All of the spoilers in this number. Needless to say, if another timeline Thanos popped into the Prime timeline again, we know that the Mad Titan would be one hell of a threat for the Avengers, with or without the Infinity Stones in his possession. And at number 5, Magus. Who's worse than Thanos? Well, how about the guy who ends up wielding the gauntlet in the comics after Thanos fails? Rather, the guy's evil self. We're talking about Adam Warlock's less ethical other half, Magus. So for context, during Warlock's cosmic travels, he comes across the Universal Church of Truth and their god, a fellow named Magus. Turns out that Magus is himself from the future, a corrupted version who occasionally pops up to screw with Adam. Magus believes that the concepts of good and evil are tools that allow one to change sentient beings and craves all to worship him. And if they don't, he'll just kill them. What about his powers? Well, he's got cosmic awareness, he's a shapeshifter, he can summon the in-betweener, he can manipulate energy, absorb a being's life force, he uses quantum magic, can manipulate time and transmute reality, is psionic, and of course possesses superhuman strength and all that jazz. Overall, he's incredibly deadly. I think I'd probably prefer to stick to Adam Warlock instead. In at 4, Sentry aka Void. Sentry aka Robert Reynolds may have only been introduced into the Marvel Universe back in 2000, but he's definitely not a threat to take lightly. He was granted his powers from a super soldier serum that moves his molecules an instant ahead of the current timeline, although in the Age of Sentry miniseries it's implied that he's actually a refugee sentient life force from another universe. He's a little like Superman to an extent, but said to be omnipotent, who generally holds back his full might. When he was first introduced though, Robert was a depressed chubby dude who started remembering a different past, which unravels the truth, that he existed in the Marvel Universe all along, but everyone's memories have been altered to forget him entirely. This is because Robert was trying to suppress Void, an entity within him who has all the same powers as Sentry does. He can shapeshift, control weather, and create something called Infinity Trundles too, which attacks one's mind in traumatic ways. He's gone toe-to-toe with some of the most powerful beings in the Marvel Universe as well. Needless to say, you can imagine why the Avengers would prefer Sentry over Void.
Number 3, Superior Iron Man. Ah yes, evil Tony Stark, who was around after the Axis event, which was an event where you saw heroes and villains swapped. And everyone went back to normal except for Tony, who not everybody was aware was evil Tony for a little bit. Well, in issue 9 of the Superior Iron Man, he would end up battling it out with Pepper Potts, who was in some Iron Man armor of her own, which was deemed inferior Iron Man armor. However, despite this, she was able to get the armor off of Superior Tony Iron Man with an electromagnetic pulse, which was pretty satisfying, just that she knew all the kind of little secrets to dismantle him. Pepper's put up with a lot over the years. So much more in the comics. So much more. Number 2, Avengers X Sanction, aka Iron Man fights Cable, and you know you want to see that. Cable was definitely there when it came down to protecting Hope Summers, even though he was being overwhelmed by the techno-organic virus inside his body, but I mean that hasn't stopped him before and it doesn't stop him here. He was actually able to defeat Tony by using some future Stark technology that Tony had not invented yet, which of course he uses to mock Tony with to no end. He's even able to corrupt and overwhelm Tony's suit and then punches him right up into the Red Hulk. It's just never a great time to be Tony. Definitely not on this list. It was pretty cool design for Cable with this, with the reactor right in the center, his metal arm, just, you know, all the Cableness. And finally, in at number 1. I think you were waiting for it. I think you know what it is. That's right, it's Civil War II. The event's so nice they did it twice. Here we have a lot of the same story beats being covered, but instead we have Iron Man in the role of Cap and Captain Marvel Carol Danvers in the role of Iron Man. This one would center around the Minority Report dilemma. There should be stop crimes before they happen. Is that ethical or right? Well, after War Machine, who was at the time Carol's boyfriend, gets fridged, she is 100% for we need to stop all these crimes before they even happen, and she is off. This ultimately ends up with a giant climactic battle where she beats Tony to death. This is a moment that would cause a lot of contention, especially because there was a decent amount of contention surrounding Carol at this point in time anyway. So it was very quickly dealt with in the comics with, oh no, but Tony had an AI, and then that AI built a body, and we can all just pretend that that AI is Tony. Yes, let's do that. But yeah, Tony died hard.
Coming in at number 10, we have Don't Mess with Batman. It will always be somewhat of a mystery as to how Guy Gardner is able to hold on to his lantern ring. The dude is kind of rude and childish, but I will admit he has pulled off some pretty impressive things as a lantern. He's just not what you would expect from a member of the most renowned space cops, and there have been plenty of times when Guy has crossed the line, like when he was forced to work under Batman with the Justice League International. Guy didn't think this made any sense. Why was a dude in a bat suit telling him what to do? Why was Guy Gardner not the one who was running the team? So Guy kept going on about how he should have been at the helm. He was whining, complaining, and insulting Batman. So Batman wanted to get everyone in order the fastest way possible and one-punched Guy Gardner. He literally knocked the dude out, a Green Lantern in one shot. So if Guy had any questions about who should be in charge, they would have all been answered answered as soon as he woke up and put his nose back in place. This was hero on hero, but for Guy, this was still pretty damn embarrassing to get floored from one shot. Coming in at number 9, we have the Lantern Club. I mean, if I was a villain with super strength, I would have done the same move. It's really killing 2 birds with 1 stone, or 2 supers with 1 super. If you flip open the comic Countdown to Crisis issue 3, you will see 2 heroes squaring off against 1 villain. In the hero's corner, you have Troya and Hal Jordan, a powerful team up that would normally come out victorious. And in the villain's corner, we have Mary Marvel, a villain that sounds like she should be in a straight-to-DVD Christmas special, but in this encounter, she showed that she's no slouch. When she takes on the 2 do-gooders, she quickly knocks down Troya and then snags Hal by his ankle, and then proceeds to beat Troya with Hal using the lantern like a club. And just like that, you have both of them bloodied and beaten. Really, that was the most effective way to get the job done. Coming in at number 8, we have Spider-Man versus the Spot. The Spot will go down as one of the worst Spider-Man villains ever, but that doesn't mean that he wasn't able to get one over on Spidey. For those of you who don't know, the Spot is a villain that is covered with small portals all over his body. Think of him as the game portal, where you go in one portal and you come out the other, even if it defies the laws of physics. In their encounter, Spider-Man tries to punch the Spot and ends up clocking himself in the face. It was like a grade school bully going, "Stop hitting yourself. Stop hitting yourself."
Number 7, Contest of Champions 2. Let them fight. There's something about that plot that just captures the imagination of fans. Just pitted together, normally on an island-style location, and forced to duke it out. Well, this happened in Contest of Champions 2, and Iron Man was pitted against mutant powerhouse Psylocke. Now, at first they were pretty evenly matched because her psychic attacks weren't really working on him because his armor could see through them because she tried some psychological tricks. However, ultimately, because she had nanites inside of her, she was able to deliver this flurry of rapid-fire blows that were also backed up by her psionic abilities, and that took him out. If you're gonna use the Goku punch strategy, then, you know, the other person gotta be prepared, and sometimes your armor just can't take that, and this was one of those times. Number 6, Rogue. This comes to us from X-Men Legacy 267. This was during the whole Avengers versus X-Men arc lead up surrounding everything. This is where the Phoenix Force and Hope Summers were viewed as the saviors of mutant kind. However, by other heroes it was viewed as more of a threat because, I mean, the Phoenix Force, pretty dangerous. Cap and Iron Man would go hard trying to capture Hope Summers, and this would lead them into many conflicts with the X-Men. Iron Man actually goes to Xavier's school, institute, Jean Grey's, whatever we're calling it at that point, and finds himself having to take on Rogue. And even though he points out that he's beaten her once before, she says that that was a different time. And then he also makes the mistake of attacking Gambit, which sends Rogue into a berserker-like rage, and she channels the She-Hulk's powers and just literally punches right through him. She just pummels him till all his armor is just bits on the ground. It's a good thing these armors are durable, / sometimes he's not actually in them, because otherwise he'd be dead several times over, which we're gonna get to later on. Dead Tony, that is. Don't mess with Rogue, or apparently more importantly, don't mess with Gambit. Number 5, the Winter Soldier. That's right, Bucky Barnes gets to make this list twice, but this time from the comic book universe. The return of Bucky Barnes was a huge event in comic book fandom, because for a time he had been viewed as one of these sacred deaths, one of those characters that was not coming back. However, things change, and his return arc was pretty well received. In Captain America 33, which followed Civil War, well, he was out to get some revenge on Tony, because at the end of Civil War, Captain America was assassinated on the courthouse steps. So Bucky felt that this was Iron Man's fault, using the whole "if you two hadn't been fighting and this hadn't happened, he wouldn't have been there" kind of logic. So the two would get into it, and ultimately Bucky would get the upper hand by pushing him into a set of power lines that would like overload his suit, which, I mean, you would think that that would happen a lot more often. I feel like I should be taking notes. Bucky Barnes is all the simple tricks. Number 4, What If Spider-Man Back in Black, which for a while I was like, that sounds like an album title, and then I remembered that it was AC/DC. I redeemed myself. This What If takes us back to, again, some events from Civil War. After Peter revealed his identity at Tony's behest, it did not go well for him, and Aunt May ended up getting shot. Well, on this What If, it's Mary Jane who gets shot, and Spider-Man goes right off the deep end, even though in main canon he was willing to sacrifice sacrifice his marriage and memories of being with her to get Aunt May back. But you know what? That's neither here nor there. We're talking about Back in Black. In this comic, he decides that he's gonna put that black suit back on, he's gonna go get revenge, and he's out to kill. Well, he ends up getting into a fight with Iron Man, and he actually puts his hand over the repulsor ray, which causes it to reflect back on Tony. This takes him out, puts him down for the count, and Peter can go off on his killing spree. Just everybody in all the realities, Civil War.
Coming in at number 3, we have Superman is trusting and dumb. Not how you would think to describe the Man of Steel, but when you hear how Lex Luthor was able to trick him, you'll be on my side. There was a comic where Superman is approached by a tailor, a guy who seemed to be a kind fellow who just wanted to do a good deed for the man who keeps the city safe. You can tell that this is an older comic. When was the last time a tailor approached you randomly and offered to make you a suit? Well, this mystery man offers to give the Man of Steel a brand new suit that will freshen up his image. Superman thinks this is amazing and accepts. The tailor makes him this suit, and without questioning anything, he puts it on. I think this might have been a case of superhero privilege. You think that you should be getting gifts from strangers at any time of the day. Well, it turns out this generous tailor was actually Lex Luthor in disguise. You think the world's greatest hero would be on the watch for the one person who's trying to kill him 24/7, but I guess he let this one slip. Oh, and there's more. Lex Luthor planted a trap in the suit. He sewed a lead-covered clump of kryptonite into the suit, which Superman never noticed. He didn't take the half second to look at the suit with his X-ray vision. Nope, there's literally a bomb in his clothes that will expose him to his weakness at the worst moment, and it was given to him in person by his arch-enemy. Lex Luthor would have had to put Superman through a whole fitting process, and he still didn't pick up on it. Coming in at number 2, we have Tin Can Iron Man. As time goes on, we have seen heroes and villains become more intricate. The way that they fight, how they can be beaten, how they use their powers. For the most part, all of these things have become more exciting. But when some heroes were originally crafted, they didn't have such interesting pieces to them. For this slip up, let's head all the way back to Avengers number 2. In this issue, the team of Earth's mightiest heroes has an enemy they never thought they would have to face, themselves. Well, kinda. See, they take on Space Phantom. This is a villain who can copy any form exactly. There's literally nothing off about his imitations, and this was his plan to beat the Avengers by turning them on each other. This was Civil War before Civil War. At first the Avengers are fooled, but then they learn his tricks, and while the Space Phantom is a perfect imitation of Iron Man, Thor is able to stop him by making it rain. And not in the cool way, he didn't throw a stack of cash in his face. Literally, rain comes down and it rusts the perfect imitation of Iron Man so he can't move. I know some of you at home are going to complain because it was Space Phantom that was beaten and not Iron Man, but it was a perfect imitation of Iron Man, meaning that Iron Man could have also be beaten by rust, which is one of the most embarrassing things that Iron Man could have learned about himself. And coming into the number 1 spot, we have the Justice League losing to Killer Frost. There's no shortage of villains that have ice powers. When it comes to Killer Frost, she's okay. She's never really had a moment to shine. She isn't really a villain that any S-tier hero would even bother with. She would be happy to see Elastic Man show up to fight her. But there was one time when her and the Suicide Squad were taking on the Boy in Blue, and Enchantress was able to smash Superman so hard he was laying on the ground immobilized. Soup has always had trouble with magic users. Well, Killer Frost was there and saw this as a golden opportunity. She used her powers to suck Superman's energy dry, draining him of his life force and his powers. She then flew off and took out the entire Justice League. Now, while it being hard for anyone from the League to take down someone that powerful, the fact that they let someone like Killer Frost get the drop on them, that is pretty embarrassing. This is one of the biggest upsets in comic book history. Coming in at number 7, we have Pants Punched and KO'd. Not all supers come from Marvel and DC, so when I get a chance I like to sneak in some moments from outside the superhero norms. For this one, we're gonna head into the world of anime to one of my favorite shows, My Hero Academia. In season 1, we have the Sports Festival, where new promising heroes go up against each other for the entertainment of the people. In this tournament, we see Aoyama, who has a belly laser power similar to Cyclops, but it comes out of his stomach. He goes up against Ashido, who has acid powers. The two square off in a short scrap that ends with Ashido blasting Aoyama's belt line with acid. This causes his pants to fall down, and Ashido slides in and uppercuts him unconscious. So getting knocked out while you're scrambling to pull up your pants
hands. Yeah, that's one of the worst ways to go out. Coming in at number 6, we have packing on the pounds. You only have to look at comic books for about 4 seconds to get enough unrealistic body standards to give an entire generation of people body dysmorphia. So when one hero puts on enough pounds that he couldn't even use his powers, that really sticks out, especially when your power is how fast you can move. I mean, if this was to happen to the Blob, I don't think anyone would notice. Being big is kind of his thing. Who were we talking about? Well, of course, the Flash. When we zoom back to the Silver Age of comics, we find an issue when one of the Flash's arch enemies, Gorilla Grodd, comes up with a plan to stop the speedster from running, and it's simple but effective. He makes him get so fat that he can't use his powers anymore. Grodd zaps the Flash with a ray that makes him retain water without him knowing. This made him bulk up until he literally weighed a ton. It would be pretty embarrassing to go from the fastest man alive to the star of my 600-pound life. Coming in at number 5, we have Wolverine gets a girl's touch. Known for being one of the coolest characters in the Marvel Universe, it must have hurt to have his body tossed through building after building from one shot from a 12-year-old girl. In issue 12 of The Runaways, Wolverine is hot on the tail of Cloak. He eventually tracks down Cloak, and lo and behold, he's being protected by Molly Hayes, aka Princess Powerful. He tries to negotiate, but things turn violent pretty quickly. Downside for Logan is that Molly is probably one of the strongest mutants ever, and with one touch he's fired out of there like a snot rocket in the shower. Getting beat up by a girl must have not been the easiest emotional scar to get rid of. Coming at number 4, we have the Yellow Room. Lanterns are very particular about colors. Some are good, some are bad, and there's a spectrum, blah 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 blah. While in All-Star Batman and Robin, we see Hal Jordan get pranked, triggered, and beat up by his least favorite color, yellow. Batman is going out of his way to mess with Hal Jordan, decides to explore his artistic side and paint a room yellow. That's quite the statement. This of course sets Hal off when he walks in, but I don't think he was ready for what was about to happen next. A young Robin slips in and manages to pickpocket Hal's ring right off his finger, and then the teenager whoops his ass. Losing your ring, getting humiliated in a yellow room, and getting KO'd by a teenager, that is a rough one.
Coming in at number 10, we have Matter Eater Lad. One of the best parts of the Peacemaker HBO Max show so far has been seeing all of the out there references and Easter eggs that creator James Gunn has gotten away with making canon within the DCEU. And one of the most interesting references to another hero Peacemaker has met is Matter Eater Lad. A bizarre Silver Age of comics character with the ability to literally eat anything, apparently Peacemaker has allied with this guy on a mission before, and has even seen him eat an entire restaurant. Given his knowledge of exactly how Matter Eater Lad's powers work, it's a fair assumption that Peacemaker would be an ideal candidate if Matter Eater Lad ever needed to be taken out. Just maybe don't let his mouth anywhere near your weaponry, Peacemaker. Coming in at number 8, we have Vigilante. While Vigilante and Peacemaker might be an odd pair of friends with a weird but accepting relationship on the show, in the comics, they're usually portrayed as much more straightforward rivals. Possessing no superpowers but a master in all sorts of weaponry and martial arts styles, Vigilante and Peacemaker are usually pretty evenly matched when they're positioned against one another by opposing forces. But given the extra abilities given to him by his variety of helmets, Peacemaker has just a few more tricks up his sleeve than his sometimes partner, sometimes rival.
Number 10, Black Widow. Sorry Black Widow, but there isn't any way you are making it out of a fight with Gore alive. He's had billions of years of experience when it comes to destroying and defeating gods, and I don't think your spy skills are going to save you in this battle. I'm sorry Black Widow, I love you, but it's just not gonna cut it. Also, if we're talking MCU Black Widow, I mean, that'd be a really easy fight cause she's dead, so yeah. The best shot that Black Widow might have in terms of a comic book Black Widow, obviously, is to distract Gore and get him monologuing, to bide her some time to put a miraculous tactical plan into action. But even then, I do not think it would be enough. Gore has thousands of years of combat experience, which means that whatever Black Widow threw at him, he likely could just push through, and even if initially he wasn't victorious, eventually he would be. Number 9, Gilgamesh. Gilgamesh is a member of the Eternals. In the Eternals film, he he was one of my favorite characters personally, played by the amazing Don Lee. Unfortunately, in that film, he was killed by the Deviants. Gilgamesh joined the Avengers in the comics back in the 1980s. Originally, he was known as the Forgotten One, but he would take up the name of Gilgamesh during his time on the superhero team. Normally, Eternals aren't so easy to kill, because when they die, they can come right back. And instead of being brought back as like android-like synthetic beings that are created by the Celestials, like in the movie, they were once humans who were simply altered by the Celestials to be a superpowered immortal race in the comics. They can be resurrected instead by a giant system known as the Machine that is integrated with Earth. But needless to say, Gilgamesh's superior strength, fighting skills, and immortality would still not be enough to stop Gore, who was used to defeating godlike beings such as Gilgamesh every day, all the time. And friends, before we move on to this next spot, if you are loving this list and you want to show our channel some love on another platform, head on over to Facebook and give us a like, give us a follow, do all the Facebook stuff. Number 8. Quicksilver. Quicksilver is known for being one of the fastest superheroes in Marvel Comics. If we use the term speedster at Marvel, which I don't think we do, we know him as one of the greatest ones within that universe. One of the greatest speedsters. It's more of a DC thing. Quicksilver, like his sister Scarlet Witch, ended up joining the Avengers, leaving the Brotherhood of Evil Mutants and Magneto, who Wanda felt they were basically indebted to. Like Scarlet Witch, Quicksilver became a hero while working on the Avengers team. And you might think his speed would be enough to keep him safe from Gore, but something you'd be forgetting is how relentless Gore the God Butcher is, and how he can pretty much make almost infinite copies of himself, each made from a part of himself as he's bonded with the All Blacks, so he can just basically like pop up other versions of him all over the place. I've seen what happens when Quicksilver gets mauled in his own series and Avengers tie-in, Quicksilver No Surrender, and let me tell you, he doesn't fare too well. While Quicksilver can run away, he can't run forever as he does get tired and needs to rest, even with his superhuman stamina and speed. And this, I imagine, would ultimately be his undoing if Gore didn't kill him before that.
Coming in at number 7, we have Batmite. Another character made canon in the DCEU by an offhanded reference, Batmite is a troublesome imp from the same fifth dimension as the Superman villain Mr. Mxyzptlk. Except this guy is a huge Batman fanboy and loves to be a giant nuisance to the Dark Knight. Given Peacemaker's annoyance at being compared to such a tiny and infuriating character, it seems likely that he'd try to find a helmet specifically to take on a fifth-dimensional villain, which sounds ludicrous, but we've already seen that Peacemaker's father has space warping technology in his secret supervillain bunker. Whatever the case, Peacemaker's brand of violence would definitely be a shocking change of pace for the character of Batmite, so maybe the imp should watch his back after getting mentioned on the show. Coming in at number 6, we have Aquaman. As a superhero, Aquaman was a bit of a joke character for a long time before more recent incarnations have begun to successfully inject just the right amount of seriousness to the character. However, that doesn't stop Peacemaker from saying some not safe for work things about Aquaman on the show, and given both John Cena and Jason Momoa's amount of muscle, that would be one hell of a showdown to see. When asked in a promotional interview if Peacemaker could beat Aquaman in a fight, John Cena replied that Aquaman's fitness was one of the only superheroes that gave him pause. However, given how the Peacemaker team was able to handle a gorilla in last week's episode, maybe animal superpowers aren't the best defense against a hero as violent as Peacemaker. Coming in at number 5, we have Rick Flag. Spoiler alert if you haven't seen James Gunn's The Suicide Squad yet, but one of the better twists of the movie and the reason Peacemaker's solo series was such a surprise is because Peacemaker was such a fantastic villain in the film. Ordered by Amanda Waller to prevent information on Starro from getting out to the public, Peacemaker is forced by his twisted moral code to fight and eventually brutally kill a hero he admired, Rick Flag, who is disgusted that he got beaten by a man such as Peacemaker. It's a pretty devastating death scene in an otherwise pretty comedic movie, and unlike other hypotheticals on this list, we got to see all too well that Peacemaker can definitely beat Rick Flag.
Number 2, Ares. Ares is the god of war, so I think you see where I'm going with this. God
God. Ares ended up on the Dark Avengers team and was also part of the Mighty Avengers, the initiative. While he might not be on the main roster of Avengers, he seemed like an important one to mention given the fact that, you know, he's an actual god. How do we know that Gore can beat him? Because, well, Gore has already defeated a ton of gods, including those that symbolize or represent war, which means that he's already got experience taking down others like Ares. So what's to stop him from defeating this god of war from the Greek pantheon? I'm pretty sure Gore is also going to destroy Zeus in Thor: Love and Thunder, and it's possible that the other gods of the Greek pantheon, Ares included, will also get decimated by Gore and the All Black.
Number 10. Batman gets punched out by Hal Jordan. Batman had a hard time getting along with the Green Lantern after his murderous incarnation as Parallax. The tension between these two came to a head in Green Lantern Rebirth, when Hal decides he's pretty much fed up with Batman's paranoia and he just socks him one. A real mean right hook right to the jaw. Batman drops from the single blow, unconscious. Guy Gardner happens to be nearby, who Batman basically did the same thing to in Justice League number 5, just one shot, boom. He's pretty happy to see Batman get what's been coming to him. It's certainly not Batman's worst defeat by a pretty wide margin, but it's definitely a serious blow to Batman's pride as well as his face, since he's basically just been knocked out with a single punch from a regular human. Then again, Batman doesn't exactly have like superpowered endurance or anything, so it does make sense that he could be brought down in one punch. What really gets me going is if Batman was so paranoid, why didn't he see this punch coming? World's greatest detective gets blindsided?
And before we continue, guys, if you want to go ahead and give us a thumbs up on our video because it goes a long way for us here at the studio. And if you don't do it, we're gonna be really sad for like an entire year, so. Number 9, Jason Todd. A Death in the Family is a 4-part storyline written by Jim Starlin and published in 1988, and it's one of the biggest DC moments ever in comic history. This was a huge moment in the Bat story because we see the Joker beat the second coming of Robin, Jason Todd, and when I say he beats him, I mean he beats him like to death. Yeah, he gets a crowbar and then a bomb just to end it all off. And it's more than just a beating that's so horrible. The Joker also used Jason's birth mother. Yeah, he blackmailed her in order to get closer to Jason. And then of course the Joker killed her too. So this is a double whammy. All the defeats, all the feels, our hearts. And what's even crazier about this whole thing is that it was up to the fans to decide his fate. Yeah, this actually came to life thanks to the producers allowing the readers to decide what happens next. There was a 36-hour period with a number you could call and vote for if you wanted the Joker to kill Robin or not. And it was pretty close apparently, something like 72 votes a difference, which is wild. Some fans even admitted to calling in more than once. You know, they just really wanted him out of there, eh? And this was of course a blessing in disguise because it brought us the glorious Red Hood, who we can't help but love.
Number 8, Spider-Man vs. Mysterio. When Mysterio first appeared way back in 1964, he gave Spidey a real run for his money. In this story, reports of Spider-Man robbing different stores in the night are hitting the news. Pete becomes pretty worried and thinks maybe he's going crazy, committing crimes in his sleep or something. He even considers visiting a psychiatrist at one point, but decides against it, fearing that he might ruin his secret identity. Later, a costumed being calling himself Mysterio appears at the Daily Bugle and tells Jameson that he's a crime fighter and he's here to bring Spider-Man to justice. He vanishes in a puff of smoke, leaving a note telling JJ to publish a challenge for Spider-Man to meet Mysterio on the Brooklyn Bridge for a showdown. The battle that follows is a particularly bitter defeat for Spidey, as Mysterio uses his special effects expertise to counteract Spider-Man's webbing, causing it to melt, and messes with his spider sense using a powerful mist that deadens the senses and reduces Spider-Man's reactions. Spidey is also blinded by the mist. Afterwards, Mysterio has a great photo op with Jameson, being hailed as a hero for taking on the menace of Spider-Man. Spidey uses this opportunity to hit Mysterio with a spider tracer and follows him back to his base to learn the truth behind Mysterio's evil ways, to eventually later defeat him.
Number 7, Vision. Vision, being an all-powerful android, alas, would not protect him from the reach of Gore the God Butcher. I doubt Vision or his maker in the comics, Ultron, would be able to stand against Gore, even if they were joined up together. While Vision might be smart, Gore just has way more experience when it comes to defeating those that stand against him. And while it's never explicitly stated, I don't think, that Gore has defeated any gods of technology that either represented that concept or were in fact made of technology, it is implied that he's defeated gods of all kinds in the comics, which would likely include technological gods. I wouldn't be surprised to learn that Gore had taken on Phalanx, who ruled over the Technarchy, or the Phalanx's creators themselves, Titans, which were basically AI societies that evolved into a singularity, who he could easily see as tech-based gods. And if he could down a Titan, he could certainly down Vision. If Ant-Man were small, Gore would squish him like a bug. If he were big, he would just rip out his giant heart. The reality is that Gore has taken on bigger beings than Ant-Man. At one point he downed an elder god, smugly brandishing its heart in victory. What's worse is that Gore is also somewhat of an inventor and kind of in a way a scientist like Hank Pym was. And he's definitely capable of thievery like Scott Lang once was. Although Gore usually prefers to kill those he generally steals from, as many of them are gods, so his version of stealing is more like murder and then steal the thing. Gore actually uses the heart of the elder god he defeats for a deadly and evil project that he's working on, a god bomb intended to destroy all the gods, ending their reign over the cosmos once and for all. Number 5. Cersei. Cersei is a member of the Eternals, but for a while she actually ran with the Avengers herself. She is known for being a good friend of Iron Man, and she went on a few adventures with the Avengers team, even joining them for a time and becoming the romantic partner of another Avenger member, Black Knight. Cersei was also a member of the team known as the God Squad as well, and technically as an Eternal, she's pretty much on a god tier level. Eternals are immortal beings who are simply resurrected after they die and have lived for millennia. As such, they are known throughout history as beings of myth and lore. Cersei herself was once known as Cersei the Sorceress because of her abilities to see into others' minds, cast illusions, and manipulate matter. However, not even this would protect her against Gore. Like Gilgamesh, the Eternal mentioned before her, Gore would not only end both of them, but he would likely also destroy the planet simply to prevent them from being resurrected by the Machine, the powerful system that brings the Eternals back after they die, and like I said, is heavily integrated into the planet.
Number 3. Magneto and Wolverine. Look, I bite my nails, alright, a lot. I can't even pull a hangnail some days, okay? I grab it, I count myself down, and then last minute I just bail. It's too spicy, I don't have enough willpower to do it. Now, I couldn't even imagine this next one, okay? I couldn't imagine if all of my bones got ripped out of my body at the same time. And that's exactly what happens to Wolverine when Magneto has had enough of his nonsense. So this all takes place during the Fatal Attractions event. Wolverine doesn't even have a chance to scream, apparently. The adamantium that bonded to his bones erupted outward like water bursting through a dam. That's how they put it. Ugh. And he's still breathing when this happens. I mean, if this isn't one of the worst things to go through, I don't know what to tell you. I mean, thankfully Xavier wiped Magneto's memory and then Wolverine was out of commission for a while. I mean, he had metal spikes sticking out of his body, so I don't think he's getting any grocery shopping done anytime soon.
Number 2. Superman gets beat by Alfred. Injustice, Gods Among Us had some pretty epic moments, like this crazy showdown between Batman and Superman that ends in a broken back for Batman. In this story, we visit an alternate DC universe in which Superman has gone mad and takes over the world as a dictator, after witnessing the destruction of Metropolis by the Joker and accidentally killing his pregnant wife. It's enough to drive anyone mad, really. Batman tries to stop Superman, eventually forming a rebellion against Superman's regime. Both are joined on either side by other heroes who share their feelings, and a superhero war rages on. Sometime after poor Batman has his back destroyed, Superman is confronted by Alfred, who has recently taken one of the superpowered pills Lex Luthor invented for Superman to use to create a superpowered army. What follows is an epic and totally unexpected beatdown as Alfred gets revenge for Batman, laying some serious blows on Superman with no remorse. Alfred cares deeply for Batman, and he really lets it show here, hammering Superman's head into the ground.
Number 10, Squirrel Girl. This one's a bit of a stretch because Deadpool didn't seem to be trying when the pair fought, but the fact remains that she did beat him. Plus, Squirrel Girl rocks, so it's going on the list. As we saw in Cable and Deadpool number 30, Squirrel Girl was able to scratch, whack, and otherwise pummel Deadpool into the ground. You may say, well, yeah, but Deadpool spent the whole time trying to figure out her name, and that's true. But hey, she was just exploiting one of Wade's major weaknesses, distractibility. Number 9, Moon Knight. Moon Knight is really cool. I'm a big old fan. And not only has he defeated Deadpool before, but he beat him 2 issues in a row in Vengeance of the Moon Knight number 7 and 8. Now, the first time was a bit less legit because Wade was distracted by a hot nurse, but issue 8 has a funhouse fight that proved much more clearly that Moon Knight can hold his own against the guy. Even in a house of mirrors, Moon Knight was able to slice and dice his way to victory. Number 8, Black Panther. Black Panther is a pretty great adversary to Deadpool for a few reasons. For one, he's an excellent fighter, both armed and unarmed. He also has a number of superhuman abilities like strength and agility, which would prove advantageous against the lesser abilities of Deadpool. Most importantly though, Black Panther has been proven to be able to mostly ignore the annoying ramblings of the Merc with a mouth. He's shown that he can better Deadpool in combat, beating him up and chucking him out a window in Deadpool 15, and for that, he's going on the list.
Number 7, Batman, The Dark Knight Rises. Directed by, of course, Christopher Nolan, who had done the previous 2 installments, comes a pretty epic conclusion to the hit trilogy. Released in 2012, The Dark Knight Rises, as you guessed from the title alone, is about Batman rising up. But from where and why? Well, how about a broken back thanks to Bane, for starters? Yeah, this is 8 years after the Joker had a run-in with Gotham City, so now Batman has to return to take down Tom Hardy as he mumbles and frowns aggressively around town. So after Catwoman walked him into a 1v1 in the tunnels of Gotham, we get one of my favorite fight scenes from any superhero movie ever. And what I love about this scene the most is that there's no music the entire time. All you hear is Batman struggling to try and make a dent on this guy. And it makes it more realistic. There's no heroic music above that distracts you, it's just stressful. It's so stressful. I mean, you can see Bruce become more and more exhausted by the minute. Leaves you out of breath almost. And it all comes to a screeching halt when Bane picks up Bruce for one last blow, right to the spinal cord.
Spirit! Oh, your buddy!
Now, I know people give this movie a hard time, but seeing Batman get his ass kicked like this reminded me that it's not always the hero that gets the last punch.
Because they belong to me.
Number 6, Wolverine, crushed by the Punisher. The Punisher and Wolverine are a couple of rusty nails, real tough guys who don't take any guff and ask questions after the whooping is done. As such, when these guys go toe-to-toe in Punisher number 17 in 2001, they get straight to wrecking each other after a very short truce. They're both on the hunt for a guy who's been killing mobsters and leaving severed legs behind. Wolverine suspects the Punisher, and of course Punisher's prime suspect is Wolverine. These two guys have a pretty nasty showdown that does not end well for old Wolverine. Punisher literally shoots Logan's face off and then blasts him right between the legs with a machine gun. Wolverine is doubled over in pain on the ground, as you can imagine, and Punisher, realizing he can't really stop Wolverine just by hurting him, crushes Wolverine underneath a steamroller and parks it on Logan's head with just his hands sticking out. Some very effective work by the Punisher and a seriously humiliating defeat for Wolverine.
And number 5, Spider-Man and Kraven. We take a look now at Kraven's Last Hunt, published in 1987, and it has quite an interesting illustration on the front page. We see a dark suit Spider-Man crawling out of a grave, covered in mud, and then in the background we read some alarming words on the tombstone, and it says, "Here lies Spider-Man." Huh, what? Okay, so this 5-part series, of course, as you would guess, centers around the death of Spider-Man in a way. But how does such a thing happen to old Sticky Pete? Well, Kraven is frustrated after his failed attempts to catch Spider-Man, so he comes up with this all-new plan that involves him shooting Spider-Man. So Kraven buries him, and even worse, he takes a Spider-Man suit and then takes his place in the world. So not only do you get defeated, but also replaced, adding insult to injury, literally. So then the new Spider-Man, our boy Kraven, now he roams in New York and brutally attacks criminals, including a group that was actually assaulting Mary Jane. So then 2 weeks later, Peter wakes up from the effects of the tranquilizer that Kraven used, and he digs himself out to freedom. Now, I've woken up late, maybe I've missed a class or two before, but I mean this is just a whole nother level of stress. So when Spider-Man confronts Kraven, Kraven gets defensive. He's like, oh no buddy, I'm the real deal now, I'm doing this. You go back to your little hole. I'm doing the Spider-Man thing now, alright? Get out of here, bucko. And then Kraven releases Vermin, who is just, a bundle of joy to hang out with. He attacks Peter thinking he was the same Spider-Man that had given him a beatdown before. And then Peter has to convince Vermin to cooler jets. Vermin is actually about to kill Peter until Kraven intervenes. I mean, talk about a messy 2 weeks, holy shit.
Number 4. Cyclops, Infinity War. Some of the heroes on this list got it pretty rough sometimes, and this defeat of Cyclops during the final battles in Infinity War is especially brutal. After Thanos had obtained the Infinity Gauntlet and performed his epic universe-altering snap, the remaining superheroes head off into space to battle against the Mad Titan. A lot of superheroes die, a testament to Thanos' epic power, but Cyclops suffers one of the worst deaths imaginable. Just as Cyclops uses one of his signature optic blasts, Thanos conjures an airtight, unbreakable cube around Cyclops' head, and, unable to use his blasts to free himself, Cyclops falls to the ground, suffocating in the cube. Captain America can't even break the cube open with a smash from his shield. A lot of the heroes who died in this event got it pretty quick. Even Cap is knocked out quickly with an epic backhand from Thanos that breaks his neck. This is a really tragic moment for all, but a super devastating defeat for Cyclops. I'm not even that big of a Cyclops fan, but the way this thing unfolded really made me feel for the guy.
Number 2. Rogue. This one may come as something of a surprise to some of you, and to others it'll seem pretty obvious. Rogue, of course, has the ability to take the powers of other supers. And should she come in contact with Wade, which would be pretty easy considering the affection they share, she can take his powers from him, making him vulnerable to attacks. Granted, she probably wouldn't want to kill him and would have trouble if he was still immortal due to Thanos, but her power would definitely give her a significant edge against a depowered Deadpool. Some might be worried that his mental anguish might mess with her, but as we saw in Uncanny Avengers number 22, she can take it, referring to his mind as a palate cleanser after Red Skulls. Plus, honestly, even without taking his powers, with all Rogue's new powers, she could probably wipe the floor with them anyway. Number 1. The Hulk. When trying to think of heroes that could beat Deadpool, a good place to start is the heroes that Deadpool goes to when he wants to die. And the Hulk fits that bill perfectly. In Deadpool number 39, Deadpool was on the hunt for a way to die, and what better way than to be pulverized by a hulking mass of muscle. So he went to Bruce Banner and just annoyed him until Bruce punched him and made him straight up explode. One might argue that the fact that Deadpool was letting Hulk beat him disqualifies this one, but the fact that one punch could turn Wade into goo kinda shows that Banner could easily defeat him.